The Letter of Hope. Elena Kuznetsova stood by the window of her small apartment in Novosibirsk, her fingers curled around a teacup that had long since gone cold. Outside, snow painted the city in shades of silence, muffling the sounds of trams and footsteps. It was a familiar winter, but one that felt lonelier than any before. At 42, Elena had accepted solitude as her most faithful companion. Her husband had died 7 years ago in a road accident, and with no children and a pension that barely covered rent, she had spent her days tutoring literature to indifferent teenagers and translating old English novels for a second-rate publisher. Her heart, though bruised, had never turned bitter. She still believed in kindness, and she still believed, however foolishly, in love. The envelope on the table glowed faintly in the morning light. She picked it up, her heart tightening with an odd mix of shame and hope. It had come from the American Dreams marriage agency. Inside was a printed letter, polite, efficient, and signed, Marcus Graham, 47, California, USA. Your profile stood out to me. I appreciate your honesty, your grace. I believe we may share a similar outlook on life. The words were carefully chosen, almost clinical, but to Elena, they felt like a lifeline. Someone had seen her, really seen her, and not dismissed her as too old, too serious, or too invisible. She had filled out the agency's profile 3 months ago, more as a quiet rebellion than a real attempt at finding love. She'd written plainly, a former teacher, passionate about books and quiet walks, emotionally grounded, not interested in games. She had included no glamorous photographs, only one taken in a garden with her late mother. If a man replied, she had promised herself it would be someone sincere. Marcus Graham had seemed just that, precise, stable, perhaps a bit formal, but someone who valued depth over sparkle. He had divorced 5 years ago, had no children, and worked as a consultant in San Diego. Their letters, though infrequent, hinted at shared interests: Tolstoy, mountain lakes, long silences filled with meaning. His words suggested admiration, even anticipation. You remind me of someone I once knew. Strong, elegant. Perhaps we can start anew. She reread his letters until the paper softened from her fingers. And then, on a bleak January afternoon, he had written simply, "Come. I have arranged your visa. I want to meet you in person." Elena hesitated for days. Her friends called her foolish. Her cousin warned of scams and dangers. But something in her resisted cynicism. She had spent her life being practical, cautious. Maybe, just this once, she could afford to be brave. She sold her late husband's watch, the last valuable thing she owned, to buy a new coat and boots. The agency arranged her flight. At the airport, she hugged her landlady, packed a tattered volume of Chekhov, and whispered goodbye to the snow. When Elena landed in Los Angeles, the world looked like a different planet. Sun-washed streets, palm trees swaying in indifferent warmth, strangers who smiled without reason. Marcus was waiting with a stiff bouquet of lilies and a measured smile. He was taller than she expected, with graying temples and a jawline honed by habit more than charm. He took her suitcase without a word, led her to a black sedan, and played classical music on the drive. At the house, a sleek, cold modernist structure nestled in a quiet suburb, he gave her a tour like a realtor, not a fiancé. He showed her the guest room, the kitchen schedule, and the list of groceries. "I appreciate punctuality," he said. "And privacy." Elena nodded, unsure whether to feel honored or dismissed. That night, alone in the room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and lemon, Elena unpacked slowly. Her clothes looked foreign against the white lacquer dresser. She placed the Chekhov book on the nightstand, then paused. For the first time since arriving, she asked herself, "What am I doing here?" But when she stepped out onto the balcony, she saw the moonlight catching on the distant hills, softening the edges of this strange clinical life. She told herself it would take time. After all, people like Marcus didn't express affection easily. He was reserved, practical, like her, or so she thought. Because 2 nights later, in the quiet of that same sterile house, Elena would find herself standing in a hallway, overhearing a voice that was not hers. A woman's laughter, young, flirty, intimate, and Marcus's voice, low and warm in a way he had never spoken to Elena. But for now, beneath the foreign stars, she closed her eyes and allowed herself one more night of hope. The truth behind the door. Elena adjusted the collar of her blouse for the third time and stared at her reflection in the guest room mirror. Her cheeks were pale despite the California sun, and the faint worry lines around her eyes seemed sharper now. 3 days had passed since her arrival, and still, Marcus remained a mystery. They shared polite meals, mostly in silence. He was always checking his phone, answering curt business calls, never lingering long in conversation. He didn't ask about her family, her past, or even her comfort. His compliments were mechanical. "You look appropriate," he had said at dinner, nodding vaguely at her navy dress. Each night, he retreated to his private office and locked the door. Elena had asked once, gently, what he was working on so late. Marcus replied without turning his head, "Deadlines. I prefer solitude in the evenings." She said nothing more. But that evening, something changed. It was nearly midnight when Elena left her room for water. As she tiptoed through the hallway, she noticed a soft glow spilling from beneath Marcus's office door. She paused, then heard it, laughter. A woman's laughter. Playful, teasing. Then a rustle, like the shift of clothing or limbs. A second voice followed, his, warm, unguarded, flirtatious. Elena froze. Her fingers tightened around the glass. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned back silently, but the sound followed her down the hall. A muffled kiss, a whisper, a laugh that didn't belong to her. The next morning, Marcus acted as though nothing had happened. He poured her coffee, mentioned the weather, and left for his appointments. His face was a wall of practiced detachment. Elena didn't confront him. Not yet. Not because she lacked courage, but because something in her needed to see the truth fully, without illusion. That evening, she waited. When Marcus disappeared into the office again after dinner, she stepped outside and circled the house to the side window. There, under the silver wash of moonlight, she saw them. A woman, young, blonde, legs crossed on Marcus's lap, her head thrown back in laughter, her hand on his shirt buttons. Marcus leaned in to kiss her neck, whispering something that made the woman giggle and swat his arm. Elena turned away. Her heart didn't shatter, it hardened. The woman was Jasmine, the assistant Marcus had briefly mentioned during one of his rare conversations. "She organizes my travel," he had said. Efficient, though a bit dramatic. Dramatic indeed. Back in her room, Elena sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The insult was not only personal, it was calculated. Marcus hadn't just deceived her. He had brought her here to display her, to appear respectable in front of whoever was watching, likely his business partners or family. She was a placeholder, a prop, an older woman meant to give the impression of commitment while he lived another life entirely. And yet, she felt no urge to cry. Instead, she felt insulted, not because she was unloved, but because she had been underestimated, dismissed, made invisible again. The next morning, when Marcus came into the kitchen, Elena was already dressed and packing her things. Her coat was draped over the chair, and her passport lay beside her teacup. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Leaving?" Elena nodded. "Yes. Your house is cold, Marcus, and not just in temperature." He offered no apology. "I can arrange your return ticket. There's no need for drama." She looked him square in the eye. "There's no need for you at all." He blinked, perhaps amused to defiance. "You think I owe you something?" "No," she said calmly. "But I expected decency. That was my mistake." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't list grievances. She simply picked up her bag and left, each step forward erasing the part of her that had ever hoped he might be a man worth trusting. Outside, the wind was soft, brushing against her face like a whisper from a better life. The taxi she had called earlier was already waiting by the gate. As the car pulled away, Elena didn't look back. She didn't need to. The door had closed. What lay ahead was uncertain, but it would be hers. And in that quiet, undeniable truth, she found her first real breath of freedom. The man in the mountains. The Montana wind met Elena like an old friend, brisk, honest, and unafraid to sting. After leaving California behind, she found herself in the quiet mountain town of Aspen Ridge, where the air carried no lies, only pine and snow. She had no plan beyond escape, only a referral from a kind translator she'd met at the agency. "My aunt rents out a guest house up north. It's humble, but it's safe." And it was. Tucked at the edge of a sprawling ranch, the cottage was small but warm, with creaky floors and thick quilts. Elena paid a month's rent up front with what little savings remained. Her hostess, Irina Melnik, a 60-year-old Russian emigre with an iron-gray bun and a soft laugh, didn't ask questions. "People come here to find breath again," she had said simply. Elena spent her first week walking trails dusted in snow, breathing in air unpolluted by deceit. She helped Irina in the kitchen, repaired books in the local library for spare cash, and began journaling the evenings. There was peace in the routine, but still an ache beneath it all. A question unanswered. Was it too late for someone like her to be truly seen? Then, on the 10th day, she met Caleb Dawson. He arrived on horseback, a tall man in a worn flannel shirt and weathered jeans, with shoulders shaped by labor and eyes that held a patient sadness. Elena had been gathering herbs near the fence when the horse snorted and drew her gaze. "You're Elena, right?" he asked, dismounting with surprising grace for a man of his size. "Irina said you were renting the guest house." "I'm Caleb. I own this ranch." His handshake was firm, not possessive. His gaze met hers without scanning for flaws. "I hope I'm not trespassing," she said, brushing dirt from her gloves. "You're standing on healing ground," he replied, half smiling. Trespassing's encouraged here. In the days that followed, their paths crossed more often. Caleb invited her to help feed the chickens, fix the fencing, and once, to read aloud from one of Irina's forgotten Russian folktale books in the evenings. He didn't speak often, but when he did, his words carried weight. He was a widower, she learned. His wife had passed 4 winters ago, and he'd buried his grief beneath chores and silence. "Love like that doesn't leave room for replacements," he once said, "but it can make space for new things to grow." Elena didn't push. She understood grief's quiet language. She spoke it too. Over time, the pauses between them became comfortable. She no longer flinched when silence stretched. In fact, she looked forward to it. Together, they shared warm coffee and cooler evenings, sitting on a porch that overlooked the hills. They spoke of Chekhov and Wendell Berry, of bread recipes and blizzards. One morning, as they were fixing a stubborn barn door, Caleb turned to her with a crooked smile. "You've got a quiet kind of strength, Elena. I can feel it when you walk in a room. Not many people carry that anymore." She looked at him, surprised by how much that simple observation moved her. It wasn't flattery. It wasn't charm. It was truth. That afternoon, Irina found her in the kitchen staring out the window, hands still in dishwater. "You like him," Irina said gently, "and he likes you. But both of you carry ghosts." "I don't want to be someone's second chance," Elena whispered. Irina shook her head. "Then be his first piece." That evening, Caleb brought her a small, leather-bound notebook. "Found this in the attic," he said. "Thought you might want to write in something prettier than scraps." Elena opened it slowly. Inside was a note, in his clean, deliberate handwriting. "You don't have to go back. Not to the cold, the silence, or the people who didn't see you. Some of us see you just fine." She closed the book, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. For once, both felt right. Outside, the snow had begun to fall, soft, slow, and without urgency. And for the first time in years, Elena didn't feel the need to hurry toward a future or escape a past. She simply stayed still. Tomorrow could bring anything. But tonight, she was finally somewhere she could belong. A love earned. Spring arrived late in Aspen Ridge, but when it did, it came gently. Snow giving way to green fields, trees budding in soft defiance of winter's long hold. Elena had now spent 2 months at the ranch. Her days followed no schedule, but each felt fuller than years of her life before. She had begun tutoring local children in English, baking bread with Irina, and helping Caleb repair an old greenhouse that had sat abandoned since his wife passed. And in all that time, Caleb never asked anything of her. No declarations, no decisions. He simply shared his world with her and made space for her to stay if she chose. But peace, as Elena had learned, does not last without being tested. The knock came on a Sunday morning. She opened the door and froze. Marcus. He stood there, his sharp suit wrinkled, jaw shadowed with stubble, and a look in his eyes that was almost regret. Behind him, a sleek black rental car idled by the gate. "Elena," he said quietly, "I know I'm the last person you want to see." She didn't respond. The wind filled the silence between them. "I made a mistake," he continued. "A series of them. Jasmine left. She wasn't what I thought she was. I've had time to think, and I realized I misjudged you. I miss your presence, your calm, your decency." Elena watched him for a long moment. Then, calmly, she stepped aside. "Come in. We don't talk in doorways here." Inside, she poured him tea without asking, her hand steady. Caleb was in the barn. She was glad. She didn't want this moment stained by his witness. Marcus sat stiffly, like a man unaccustomed to humility. "I was wrong about you," he said. "You weren't too old. You were too good for the version of me that existed back then." Elena sipped her tea. "And now, I want to try again. I've changed." She studied him, his expensive watch, his restless fingers, his eyes darting around the room as if trying to measure its worth. Everything about him still felt temporary, impatient. "I see," she said softly. "You didn't come for me. You came for what you think I can fix in you." He stiffened. "That's not fair." "No," she replied, setting down her cup, "but it's true." Marcus stood abruptly. "You're staying with that rancher, aren't you? Is that what this is about?" "No," she said, rising to meet his gaze. "This is about me. You had your chance. You didn't want a partner. You wanted a performance." He said nothing, just stared at her, realizing perhaps for the first time that she was not someone to be bargained with. "I won't ask you to leave angry," she added, her voice even. "But I will ask you to leave." Marcus didn't argue. He left the way he came, alone, and a little smaller than when he arrived. That evening, Elena found Caleb on the porch, repairing the latch on the screen door. He looked up. "Visitor?" "Yes," she said, sitting beside him, the past trying to look like the future. He gave a soft chuckle. "Did it work?" "No," she smiled, "but it reminded me of everything I don't want, and everything I already have." Caleb nodded slowly. "I never wanted to push. You've got your own rhythm. I just hoped, maybe one day, you want to stay longer." She looked out at the horizon, the fields bathed in golden light. "Caleb," she said carefully, "you don't make me feel rescued. You make me feel chosen. There's a difference." He turned, eyes meeting hers with the quiet certainty she had come to admire. "Then choose me," he said simply. "Not because you need to, because you want to." "I do," she whispered. There were no grand gestures, no flowers, no diamonds. Just the smell of pine, the weight of truth, and a man who knew the value of stillness. Elena reached for his hand. This time, the silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of possibility, and it was hers to keep.